do it. I'll do the full Monty. Grow up in a very sickly home. A lot of trips to the hospital. Thinking I want to be a doctor. So I go to school, and I'm not a good student, so I don't get into medical school. So my backup plan was to become a hospital administrator. So I did that for 12 years, and then became a consultant. Did that for 20 years. I enjoyed the nomadic lifestyle, uh, living on airplanes. Pretty good at it, and then have a healing crisis over a frozen shoulder where I couldn't lift my hand above my waist. And it was basically my body saying, we're not going to do this consulting thing anymore, because it was my arm had gotten locked like I was still pulling a suitcase. And so my body said, we're not going to do that anymore. So it led me to my now wife, Dr. Liz, who's a chiropractor, who healed me within a couple weeks of that malady and awakened me to the world of natural healing. Because prior to that, because I was an allopathic brat, I knew that in a yardstick of healing, 35 inches were MDs and 1 inch of wackos. And in that process of being healed, the yardstick flipped, and I realized that there's 35 inches of gifted natural healers, and there's 1 inch of a bunch of bozos who have the MD degree. And then I actually was kind of Dr. Liz's Girl Friday for a couple of years. I was like the guy who ran the office, and just started reading and decided I wanted to become a wellness coach. One of her clients suggested I start to write. She was a psychologist, and she said, I think you should use paradoxical intent. I said, I don't know what you're saying. And she said, it's called reverse psychology. So my theme in my writing was to teach people how to get sick. And I would write articles like, you want a heart attack? Here's how you get a heart attack. If you want a broken bone, here's how you can get broken bones. And the theme of all that writing was deplete the body of magnesium. And that was my focus and our focus in the practice for probably the first 5 years, where we focused on helping people restore minerals in general, but magnesium in particular, not knowing why people's magnesium was being constantly hosed, began to focus on copper. I believed the bullshit that, oh, there's copper toxicity, then discovered the protein ceruloplasmin, which led me to discovering why everyone loses their magnesium is because they're iron toxic. And when you discover that there's 25 times more iron in the human body than copper, the whole realm of focus around copper toxicity and iron deficiency becomes a joke, and you realize that that's just a ruse to keep people sick, because what do people do? They attack copper and they take iron supplements, and then they auger down sicker and sicker and sicker, not really realizing why they're getting so sick. And when you understand that the protein ceruloplasmin is made up of copper, and that's what regulates iron, suddenly the universe becomes very ordered, and you understand how all of these symptoms that people have are tied back to iron-induced oxidative stress. And that's been the journey for the last 6.5 years, is going from this very naive, just take more magnesium, to now doing full-scale assault on the poison that's killing people is the iron, and the complete ignorance about how to interpret it in a blood test. The biggest perpetrators of it are the allopathic practitioners who have no idea what iron really is all about. So that's a lot of blah, 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 but that's kind of the long and short of my journey.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I've interviewed people who are extremely, they can't eliminate iron out of their body. So they won't even have cereal with iron in it because it makes them sick. It stores in their body. Is there any way to eliminate that?
Yeah. No, it's the protein ceruloplasmin. It's spelled CER ULO, P as in Peter, LASMIN, was discovered by two Swedish physiologists in 1941, Holmberg and Laurel, and they were reverential when describing it. And for the first 30 years, scientists were reverential around that protein. It's a very complicated protein in that it has 1,056 amino acids. To give you a scale of proportion, what's considered the iron hormone is called hepcidin, HEPCIDIN. That has 25 amino acids. And what is very clear in the literature are people, it's very much like people who are Republican versus people who are Democrats. And there's a Republican community that absolutely worships at the altar of hepcidin as the master hormone and will ignore anything to do with ceruloplasmin. And then there are the enlightened few who are Democrats who understand that this very incredibly complex protein is essential for normal iron metabolism. And what ceruloplasmin's gift is to the human body and to all mammals on this planet is iron mobilization. When iron gets stored, it's toxic. That's when it turns to rust and it turns the tissue around it to rust. But when iron is moving, like you may recall when you were in a square dance, moving around the room and feeling the excitement of going from partner to partner and dancing to the music, that's very exciting. But when the music stops, it gets boring. You go to your table, you sit down, and that's called storage. And iron needs to be moving, and the music is ceruloplasmin. So when people have an iron storage problem, it's for lack of that protein that is the absolute requirement for moving iron around the human body. And the fact that doctors don't know that is staggering. I'm sorry, Angie, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we were recording because we did discuss this earlier, how
Yes,
Dr. Morris got 2 hours in and realized he was not recording, and I don't want to miss this. So
no, we're recording, but there's a little bar at the bottom, Morley. There's a little bar at the bottom of the Skype, and there should be a video button there because all I have is your picture. I'm not actually getting a video of you.
Right.
And I apologize. My camera is broken.
Okay.
My computer, 2 weeks into my acquisition, it was about 6 months ago, the camera broke and I just never took it back to have it fixed. So I apologize.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Hey, we have your picture.
I'm a static picture, but a pretty dynamic guy. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love listening to you talk. It's incredible. I've listened to some of your interviews, and I mean, just you got it together. And I don't know what you did in administration for the hospital, but you learned something along the way somewhere.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, Gary. This is a late in life experience. If you saw my college transcript, you'd run the other way and say, how does this guy even know how to spell magnesium? Much less talk about it. But the universe has a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And so now this guy that, when he was 18 wanted to be a doctor, has clients in 30 countries around the world. And it's like, it's an absolute out-of-body experience. And for some reason, I focus on enzymes. I don't know how that happened, but that was my early orientation. And enzymes are they're very much like the car you drive. So here's the question: when was the last time you drove your car without a key? I mean, you can push it, but it's not as much fun, right?
Right.
And so enzymes require a mineral key to open them up and to turn them on. And in fact, enzymes do have an engine. And I learned that from my younger son, Tom, who's getting his doctorate in biochemistry at Stanford. And I asked him a couple years ago, I said, so, like, what are you studying? He said, well, all the iron enzymes turn to the right, and I'm figuring out a way to get them to turn to the left. And I said, why would you do that? He said, well, no one's ever done it before.
Hmm.
So he's getting his degree later this summer, which means he's figured it out, because they wouldn't let go of him until he'd figured it out. So the point being is the, the these enzymes require mineral catalysts, and the minerals, there are only a handful of minerals that really run the bulk of the body's machinery, and they're easily lost to stress. And so when we're freaking out about some bill that we've got, or tax time, or an argument with our spouse, or we're eating really toxic food, or we are swayed by our doctor that we need more iron, and iron is a stress. It's like that stress has a price. And I affectionately refer to it as the magnesium burn rate, but it's a lot of minerals, but magnesium is the conductor of the cellular orchestra of minerals. And when there's no conductor, there's chaos. And all you got to do is think back on any orchestra you've ever heard practicing before the conductor got up on stage. And it's just a cacophony of sound. But when the conductor gets up on stage and taps the podium, suddenly there's silence. And then when the conductor raises their baton, there's beautiful music. And that's the role of magnesium inside the body when it's allowed to be on the podium. And no one ever told us that there's this wrecking ball that keeps coming into the body and keeps knocking the conductor off the stage. And the wrecking ball is iron. And anyone who lives in the UK or Canada or Australia or Singapore or the US of A is being drowned with dietary iron and high fructose corn syrup and GMO, all of which conspire to raise iron levels in the body. And we can add vaccines to that, and chemtrails, and so on and so forth, all of which is directed at increasing the toxicity of iron in the human body. And I didn't believe this at first. I thought, this is beyond demonic. It's not possible that they could be that manipulative. But when I began to connect the dots, it's very clear what the target is and what it's been for the last 70 years.
Wow.
This didn't happen last week. This goes way back in time. This all started with the Second World War. And I'm just a conspiracist enough to say that that's probably why they had the Second World War, was to create so much confusion that they could then change the food system. Now that's a very twisted thought, but a lot of things happened in 1941 that people don't want to know about around the world. And it was all done under the aegis of the confusion and chaos that a war of that scale would bring. So, there's never going to be a way to prove that, but what's very clear is that governments have conspired with the food system and the pharmaceutical system to create a toxic environment. That's a fact.
That is a fact.
And we can demonize Monsanto all we want, but the FDA is complicit. I mean, when I became aware of that issue was the whole issue around the use of BHT milk and how that was supposed to help milk production for cows. And the research, I don't know whether you've ever pulled back the curtain on that research about genetically modified milk production, but the research originates in Canada. And it was a baccalaureate biology student who studied 3 cows. And only 2 of the cows didn't have problems with the BHT, so they, on the basis of that one student's study, that's what the FDA based their approval on.
Oh my gosh.
And what makes it even more fascinating is they chose to pursue that route with milk because they knew it was going to draw an immediate visceral reaction on the public's part. You can't taint our milk. And people went crazy. But what they didn't know is that as they were expending all their emotional fuel on the milk issue, coming in the back door of the supermarkets was GMO grain on a scale that people had no idea was happening.
Wow.
And over a period of years, suddenly the food system changed very dramatically in the early 90s, and people were still beating their chest about milk, but not realizing that there was toxic levels of GMO in all of the processed food because people were so distracted with the milk. And that's how it was. That was, and I'm trying to think of the author's name. Completely, Jeffrey Smith, I believe. He's the one who figured that out. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's all through a process of deception. So the unique aspect that I brought to all of this discussion is getting people to realize, or at least some people to realize, that the body does not run on hormones. It actually runs on minerals. Because you can't make a hormone unless an enzyme is activated by a mineral. It's physically impossible. So when people have hormone problems, it's really a mineral problem. But doctors are not taught that in medical school, and that's why I affectionately refer to their degree standing for mineral denialist, because they've never been taught that minerals are what run the body. And the minerals are really boring because you get them in your diet.
Yes.
Well, how can you charge money for telling someone to eat more avocados or eat more of this or that? It's like, no, but if I tell you need a hormone, which is totally going to screw up your body, you'll pay good money for that. And that's how they've done it. And they've completely twisted physiology because the body does not run on hormones. Hormones move minerals in the body. That's what they're designed to do. But people don't understand that. They think, oh, I've got an estrogen problem or I've got a progesterone problem, not knowing that, well, if you have a shortage of progesterone, what it really means is you have a shortage of magnesium. Because you can't make progesterone without magnesium.
And they all give us these progesterone creams typically and don't do a bit of good.
Yeah, right. I mean, so it's just, as I tease people, I said, I'm really boring, but I'm also very biological. Mm-hmm. And it's just, that's where people don't. I'll tell you about a funny interaction I had with a very high level physician up in Chicago. I used to see this guy in Starbucks. My day starts with a couple hours of reading every morning. And when I was living up in Chicago, I befriended this guy. It turns out he was a very accomplished surgeon. He had gone undergraduate, Harvard, medical school, Harvard, and had been the chief resident at Mass General. So he'd rung all the big bells. It's like, you don't get better trained than that. And so we were chatting, and I said, I've written this article about how magnesium deficiency causes heart disease. He said, I'd like to read that. I'd really be interested. So I gave it to him, and he read it. He's like, wow, this is really pretty good. He said, this deserves to be published. I said, well, thank you. It's very kind of you. He said, but what you have to understand, Morley, is that magnesium is no longer a popular drug. And I said, excuse me, Tom, what did you just say? He said, well, it's just not a popular drug anymore. It was back in the 60s, but it's no longer. I said, it's not a drug, Tom, it's a mineral. And he looked at me with this ashen face, and he said, really?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
One of the best educated physicians on this planet did not know magnesium was a mineral.
Wow.
That's what we're up against.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You see it every day.
Yeah, and the thing is, between the three of us, we could probably share war stories like that. And it's like, how do we break through the din of propaganda that at times feels overwhelming. I mean,
Absolutely.
we're going up against Himmler every day. I mean, what's coming out of the propaganda machine is just, it's ridiculous.
Hmm.
And people, I mean, some of the questions they ask on Facebook are like, what, where, who are you? Where did you learn this? And I wish there was a slap button on Facebook. It's just like, wake up, come on,
Yeah.
and they get reinforcement from their doctor who doesn't understand how the body works.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I was writing the other day, and I said, if you want to know about disease, medicine, and death, go to a doctor. If you want to know about life, regeneration, and health, you have to go to nature.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, people are very gracious and they're very grateful for what I've done to help them, and they always talk about the Morley protocol. I said, wait, no, it's not the Morley protocol. This is Mother Nature we're talking about,
Yes.
and I really want people to make that connection, Gary, because you're absolutely right. It is nature. It is natural. And there's the thing when I first met Dr. Liz, she's a classically trained chiropractor, and I knew that all chiropractors were witch doctors, but I finally was in so much pain, I finally put my tail between my legs and went to see her. But but when she realized I was from allopathic land, and I realized it was like the mongoose and the snake, and we were like doing this very awkward dance to see, what is there a way we could survive this? And then we realized that we actually had a gift, that I understood that world that she had always demonized, and she was a gifted healer that was a perfect embodiment of the world that I didn't understand, and that's how we kind of forged the partnership that then became, a marriage. But it's a it's an amazing process to get people to realize that the world of conventional medicine is a complete farce.
Yes.
It's all smoke and mirrors. It's the absolute Wizard of Oz, and people are still looking at the smoke and the mirrors, and they can't. For some reason, there's a very small percentage who are willing to embrace the nature that you're talking about.
Absolutely. I just wrote this the other day too. I'm writing a book right now, but this is going to be in the book, that one of the things we're cursed with is a scientific mind, because it categorizes everything and it keeps going deeper and deeper into it, and that takes away common sense, because you first ask, is it scientifically proven?
Right? Yeah. Is there a peer-reviewed study that proves this? Yeah. I mean, what I'm sharing with clients is this notion that actually medicine has become a double-blind experiment. Neither the doctor nor the patient knows that the medication that's being used is a poison.
True.
And that's the frightening thing, is that as the people who are waking up do realize it's a poison, but the doctors, they can't go there because then it invalidates everything that they believe.
Yeah, and they can't do it by law, right?
Right.
They're
Yeah,
legally
exactly.
bound.
That's right. Yeah, and they can't use the cure word, which is like, really? I mean, I remember that was 1992. That was Bill Clinton and uh, um, David Kessler at FDA. They ushered in that you're not allowed to use the cure word. That everyone in the country should have said, "Wait a minute, what are you talking about?"
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
So that's the process of manipulating our sense of reality has been twisted, and we are living a post 1984 world where black is white and white is black.
Yeah, I totally.
Yeah,
And you were right about Jeffrey Smith. He wrote that book, Seeds of Deception.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful book, and I've met him, chatted with him. He's just a real bright light who faces his own set of impenetrable walls, trying to get people to realize that we're being poisoned. And most people, I, you could survey 1,000 people, and I bet you would only find one person that even knows what GMO stands for.
It's totally true, because everybody I talk to, they don't have a clue.
No, no, because it's so deeply embedded in the food system now, we don't even think to question it. And just this week, I was talking to a client, and I'm pretty intent on getting people to take cod liver oil. I'm very specific about brands. And this client was asking me, she said, "Have you ever questioned why the other brands don't work?" I said, "Actually, no, I never thought." And she said, "Well, her theory, which I think has some credence, is she said it's probably coming from farmed fish,
Thanks. Yeah.
and farmed fish is eating GMO corn and soy."
Right.
And I never would have thought of that. And it's frightening that's how they're penetrating. It goes back to and I'm blanking on the author right now, but Michael Pollan. It goes back to his point about we are what we eat eats. It isn't that we're eating meat. It's what did that animal have to eat, and how twisted was their diet. And living in Louisiana, we have the luxury of being able to find enough farmers, but it's like that's real work to find farmers that you can trust,
Yes.
that you can look in the eye and know that they're being responsible to both the plants and the animals that they're raising. Because most don't even think about it. They don't even question the use of Roundup. They just think that that's part of modern farming now. So that's part of the challenge.
At what point did things change for you in your thinking? Like in your 20s and 30s, I'm assuming your thought process was like the most of us, and ours has turned. What occurred in your life, and at what point did you start to go, "Oh, this is what's happening"?
Great question, Angie. It came in stages. I think many years ago, and I probably was in my 30s. My former wife, I'm a type O positive, and she tried to get us to eat vegetarian, and I started to feel really bad, and I couldn't figure out why I felt really bad, and I started to gain weight, and I happened upon um, Dr. Atkins and his diet, and I bailed on the vegetarian, and then I read Diamo's book about what eat right for your blood type, and not that I'm a disciple of that, but it made sense to me, and so I began to be more careful with what my diet was, but I was living a pretty rigorous lifestyle, traveling a couple 100,000 miles a year on a plane. It's not conducive to stress free. Um, then I read an article that said if you're feeling kind of fatigued, maybe you need DHEA. And being the ignorant American that I was, I thought, well, the article said take 5 milligrams. So if a little is good for you, then a lot must be really good for you. So I took 50 milligrams of DHEA for 7 years. Don't ever do that. It really messed with me. And then I think an important breakthrough was when I did make the connection with Dr. Liz, and she saw my vault of supplements that I was using to stay alive. She almost passed out. She said, "You take these every day?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Let's do a hair test now, and then we're going to stop all this insanity for 90 days, and then we're going to do another hair test and see how you are." And I was like, I was feeling pretty cocky. I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll take the challenge." And it was a frightening wake up call, because I went from being this propped up guy on stilts to being what's called a four lows, where where I barely had enough calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium to get through the day, and didn't realize how fragile I was. And it took me 2 years to rebuild my body. And then I think the real breakthrough, Angie, was discovering what real food was. I mean, my mom was a good cook, and my former wife was a decent cook, but I didn't know what real food was until I was graced by what Dr. Liz considers a typical meal. And I was like, I would look in the refrigerator and there was nothing to eat. And then 10 minutes later, she'd throw something together that was a 5-course meal. And I was like, where did this come from? And it's become a big joke. But the funny thing about my quirkiness is I can probably run circles around most people about nutrition, but don't ask me to cook a meal. And that's my flaw, is I know a good meal now when I taste it, but I'm too lazy or too distracted or whatever the right word is to do it myself. But that I think is going to be my next stage of growth is being able to incorporate all this into good eating for myself and not be dependent on a good chef or my wife who's, she's an angel. And it's just, I didn't know what real food was until about 6 years ago. So it's been a very gradual process. And she was born and raised in Louisiana, and people from this part of the world pride themselves on real food and living off the land. And I did not know what that meant. And so it's come in waves and in stages. And I have to remind myself that the people that we work with can't go from 0 to 100 miles in 6 months. It's too much.
It is way too
And
much.
yeah, it's because it's like stretching a rubber band. It'll just snap back to what it used to be. So you have to pick where the battles where we can win and have the biggest impact, and deciding, the general chooses their battle. So which battle is best for us to choose where we can have the biggest impact?
Absolutely.
And I think that's why I chose minerals, because I thought that would have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
But everyone has a slightly different perspective on that.
Well, I'm big into hydration.
Yeah.
With live liquids that have nutrients and enzymes and electrolytes and things and you can't just wake the body up. It's been asleep for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you'll get even sicker if you do.
That's exactly right. It overwhelms the body.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the videos I was watching of you the other day, you mentioned farming and what farming is about today and what it used to be about years ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Would you cover some of that for people?
Well, sure. I mean, I think the thing is, we evolved from farms. I mean, our ancestors grew their own food, and there was diversity on that farm because you were providing for yourself. And I mean, Joel Shallaton is probably the quintessential example of what farming used to be. And I've been to that farm. It's actually a very funny experience to go to his farm in Virginia, because it's the frumpiest looking farm. You have this quintessential image of a farm is the big red barn and the white fence, and you go to his farm, it's like it is just a real dump. But it's one of the most productive farms probably on the planet. The 140 acres that he's got are amazing. And I think people have lost their connection to the soil. We hear the expression. We're it's so much a part of our psyche. We're ashes to ashes and dust to dust. But people don't take the time to say, what does that really mean? Mm-hmm. So I remind people that when I'm doing their hair analysis, I sent their hair sample to a lab in Dallas that burned their hair to see what the mineral ash content was. And that's really all we are, is ash. We are minerals from start to finish. And my younger son, the smart, fast one, he likes to go camping. And he will take a pinch of dirt and sprinkle it on his food. And he calls it trail spice. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And so I think people have lost that connection. The vast majority of people now live in an urban environment. And they think that, chickens come as McNuggets. They don't know what a chicken is, and they don't know what it means to raise a chicken or raise any kind of plant or animal. And we have become divorced from this commercialized agribusiness that was brought in the 70s during the Nixon era. Um, and it was get big or get out. And people didn't know what was happening to the infrastructure of our country when that happened. And Earl Butz was a very forceful individual, and he changed the shape of agriculture in this country and destroyed it. And if you've ever seen the movie King Corn, you know the story of, of those two classmates at Yale who kind of traced their roots back to Iowa. It's a great story, and then they interview Earl Butz to see what happened to this guy. But the thing is, people don't have a visceral appreciation for what it takes to create food. I didn't. I was an absolute urban brat until I was spent 2 years living on the farm where Dr. Liz grew up and saw how hard her brothers worked day in and day out to try to create food. And it's very sobering, it's very humbling, and I in those 2 years realized I don't ever want to be a farmer. Because it's really hard work. I mean, it's sun up to sundown. And you know, something as simple as we're supposed to get up with the sun and go to bed with the sun. But because we live in an urban environment and we have artificial light, we have defied nature and we've destroyed that rhythm in our body. And so on so many different levels, we've lost the connection of the rhythm of the soil and just what it means. I mean, I very often tease my clients that they treat their problems like Bill Murray in the movie Caddyshack. I don't know whether you're familiar with that movie, but it's about him being a caddy at a very hoity-toity country club. Well, I happen to live a couple miles from where that country club was, so it's very funny. I was never a member of it, but I knew the members, and they're a very interesting group of people. But in the movie, he tries to drown out the groundhogs. He tries to poison the groundhogs. He uses dynamite to blow up the groundhogs. And there's actually a very simple way to get rid of groundhogs. I don't know whether you know it, but you only have to put down one mineral on the soil when they leave, and it's called lime. And as soon as you put lime on the soil, it changes the pH of the soil, and the groundhogs leave. And the irony is, most doctors that we know, most conventional practitioners that we know, are Bill Murray, trying to drown, poison, and blow up the problems of their patients.
Absolutely.
And they don't have the understanding of the soil of their patient's body. And what I've become very mindful of is the transfer of soil from mother to child. And it really changed a lot about 100 years ago when they started to change the food system. Because the agricultural practices changed, it changed the composition of the foods that our great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents ate, and the mineral imbalance of our ancestors' womb produced a child that wasn't complete. And then that child grew up to be a woman who had children, and her womb was imbalanced. And what I'm seeing is the bookends of my practice is the best hair test I've ever seen was from a 97-year-old woman who grew up on a farm in North Dakota and drank well water her whole life.
North Dakota! Woohoo!
And the worst hair test I've ever seen is of a 2-year-old whose family hasn't lived on a farm for over 100 years.
Wow.
And so that's that's the contrast that's occurring, and it sounds too simple. It sounds too pedestrian that our loss of connection to the soil is what's creating our problems in our body. But I think it's inescapable, and it's getting people to see the uh, the power of that connection. Because most people are looking for complicated answers to what they think are complicated problems.
Right.
And the reason why they think they're complicated is they're too smart or they know too much because they've been lied to by the internet.
Well, that's
Yes,
just
and-
it, Morley. I know that when we get into talking with people, they're looking for more answers. Like we tell them it's this simple, and they're like, but what more? There must be more, and there's not. It's simple, but like you say, and like Gary knows, just like the rest of us, it's not that complicated. We just have been so brainwashed and so forced at us that this is how it needs to be. It needs to be these medications. It needs to be complicated when in reality it's very simple.
Yeah, and it's I don't think one of the big ahas for me just in the last few weeks was discovering that most medications have iron in them.
Mm.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't either.
I don't know.
And the one of the world's greatest experts on magnesium was a woman. Her name was Mildred Seelig. She was a physician and she was a researcher in big pharma when she started out. And she discovered that the medications were causing magnesium loss at a cellular level. And I mean, I've read many of the studies that she did, but she's never talked about that. And what I've pieced together, because I've connected with a number of very high level magnesium researchers, no one's ever talked about this iron issue. And I think it's a third rail issue in the research community. The really enlightened ones know and they talk around it. And I think people who are at a certain level know that's the problem, but they can't talk about it. And then just last night, someone was lamenting the fact that it was the birth control pills that was their undoing. And someone made the comment, well, don't you know they have iron? Because in the birth control pills, there's a period where there's a placebo. There's like, I think it's 5 to 7 of those pills are placebos. They have nothing in them. Guess what they are? They're iron supplements. And that's why women have so much problems with birth control pills. It's not just messing up their hormones, it's dumping iron into their already toxic body.
Wow.
And a very gifted member of the MAG community, who's a very accomplished researcher, her first reaction was, that's not possible. So she went to Google and she researched it last night, and she went, oh my God, it's true. They do put iron in these pills.
Yeah.
So it's just, the tragedy is we have lost connection to nature in general, as you were saying earlier, and we are now living the matrix, and most people are blind to the fact that they're living the matrix.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that they keep taking the wrong colored pill, and it's just that's where society is. And my estimate is that maybe 2% of people will wake up. It's not going to be a whole lot more than that. And that's a very sobering number to get your hands around and say, really, 2%? But that's about what it's going to be.
Yep.
And so the people who are drawn to us are truly aware and willing to do the work that it takes to get simple and have discipline and go back to their origin.
Yeah, so most of that's because they're forced to.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. And I try to get people to realize, and I'm sure you all do as well, but I try to get them to realize that this crisis is part of their wake-up call. Because what I'm really devoted to is my mission isn't to figure out all this mineral stuff. my mission is really to help ease their pain so they can get on with their spiritual mission. Because I don't think we came to this planet to be dealing with cancer and fibromyalgia and neurodegenerative. That's not why we're here. We've been distracted with that, but each of us has a deeper mission, and I'm just doing my part to try to help some portion of humanity to make that connection and to try to accelerate their ability to do it. And it's just that to me is the higher calling. That's really that's what this work is about. And this idea that there's some sophisticated process of healing, I don't think that's true. Just go back to Mother Nature. The body will take care of itself and get on with your life.
Absolutely. The body heals itself.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And when Dr. Liz used the phrase innate wisdom, I looked at her like, what are you talking about? What do you mean, what's this innate wisdom? I mean, you want to talk about someone who was arrogant. That was me 7 years ago. I had no idea what she was talking about. And now it's like we tease each other because she's the shaman and I'm the showman. And so I get up on stage and do my song and dance, but she's the real healer. I don't, truth be known, I don't like to be this healer. I don't feel comfortable. I won't touch people. Whether people come in from Louisiana and I'll talk to them all day long, but there's some people who want me to put my hands on them. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's like, that's not, maybe I have the ability. I don't even know. I don't want to know, really. I want to help people wake up and get on. It's funny that this guy who had this early aspiration of being quote unquote a healer really sees himself as an educator and a catalyst. That's really what I'm most comfortable with. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this kind of conversation because I think it'll help your community and other people that will happen upon this just to say, wow, I never thought of it that way, or look at it in a new light. So I'm very, very mindful of the opportunity here. So I appreciate that.
Oh, us too. I mean, because the information, nobody could listen to this information and not realize it's real.
Right.
It's true. It's simple.
It is true, and it's interesting. One of my there's a covey of angels that have come to my rescue. One of them is MJ Hampstead, who is the administrator for the MAG group, and she just like came out of nowhere and said, "Do you need help?" And I said, "I don't know what you have in mind, but go at it." So she became the administrator, and then a client down in Australia, her name is Janelle Young. She said, you need to start publishing. I said, well, I don't have time for that. So what did she do? She took all my blah, blah, blah from the Facebook. She turned it into 5 books.
Wow.
And it's just, they're not going to win the Pulitzer Prize, trust me. But the point is, she realized that more people would benefit if they could see my written word in addition to what happens on Facebook or what might happen on these talks. And then she thought it'd be important to start sending blogs out. And I'm like, really? Do you think we got to do that? And so she sends this blog out, and it's just like they're a couple thousand, 2,500. I don't know. I have followers. I don't know where did they come from. I have no idea where they came from. I have no idea where we're going, but they quote unquote follow me, and so they get they get these blogs. And it's apparently stirred things up. I had no idea because there are a lot of people who don't go to Facebook who will read the blog. I didn't know that. And so I share that just to say that there are so many different channels of where people get their information. And there's some people who really gravitate to these kinds of conversations that are very important for them. And they do become inescapable. And then the other thing that Janelle did was she created this Facebook group called Morley Testimonials. People who just started talking about their healing experience. And I wrote her, I said, do we really need another Facebook group? And she laughed and she said, just watch. And it's fascinating to see the impact that people have when they go back to Mother Nature.
Oh yeah.
And so the community needs that affirmation and that reinforcement. And so this video will help people get that affirmation, because we do get discouraged. We do hit rough spots.
Yes.
And people need the perspective that this too shall pass, and that there is wisdom in this very simple, in this road less traveled, as they say.
Yeah, we get caught up in our old training, in our old scientific mind, because we want to complicate everything. So we
Exactly.
need to be pulled back to the simple.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just ran across a quotation by Einstein. If you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And so what's my litmus test? If I can understand it, I'm hoping that I can explain it so that others can understand it. So it's really trying to get people to get it to a level where they can explain it to their children. And what one of my clients has a 5-year-old who had a friend come over. So a 5-year-old had his friend come over, and the friend was talking about being a fast metabolizer.
Oh my gosh.
And this 5-year-old son of my client said, well, actually, I'm a fast oxidizer. And his friend said, well, what's that? And he explained to him from the standpoint of a hair test what that means.
Wow.
And I'm like, that blew me away. A 5-year-old understanding it, and that was because the mother had explained it to her child because I had explained it to her. I was just like, I was totally blown away by that. But that's what we really need to do, is be able to explain it so that the 5-year-olds understand it. And I regularly thump people in the nose and say that what I share with people should be taught in 2 locations. This should be taught in kindergarten and medical school. And the more it's taught in kindergarten, the less we need in medical schools. Because what we're talking about is very basic stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it's almost embarrassing that we talk about it.
Exactly.
I mean, if our great-grandparents were here, they would slap us silly right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they got it. They understood, And today, I mean, in today's agricultural world, they're actually killing the soil.
Absolutely.
And they're feeding the plants with chemical stuff. So it's all about the plant, not the soil. And that's a crime against nature right there.
Dave, and I think what you were referring to earlier, Gary, I think what I failed to mention was a wonderful book for folks that are connected with you all to read. The author's name is Andre Voisin, Voisin. He's actually was a British dairy farmer, obviously originally from France, but the title of the book is called Soil, Grass, Cancer.
Wow.
It was published in 1957. It's about 325 pages long with over 400 footnotes. So he's not your average dairy farmer. But what he explains in meticulous detail with great simplicity is that the lack of copper in the soil prevented it getting into the grass, prevented copper getting into his cows, prevented it getting into the milk, which prevented the copper getting into the humans, and it was causing cancer. And he explains it in a very compelling way, and it turns out he's right. Because it's the copper that regulates the iron that causes the cancer.
Wow.
And the book, it took me 3 rigorous weeks to read that book and understand it. But I would really encourage people who really want to understand just how basic this is and how important that one mineral happens to be. And it's been drummed out of our diet.
As has many.
As have many, but the three that I focus on the most are magnesium, copper, and iron, and the relationship that the three of them have to the protein ceruloplasmin. That's my secret sauce.
All right.
That's it.
That's
And the more you lower your iron burden and the more you worship at the altar of magnesium and copper, the more the body can make ceruloplasmin.
so you're not into iron supplements.
The only iron supplements that I think should be administered would be given to physicians.
Given to
Yeah.
Good idea. So
Right
yeah,
on.
because I'm not a big supplement fan. I'm a big, it's in the food.
Yes. And I absolutely respect and applaud that, but for it to be in the food, it's got to be in the soil.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's very difficult to find enough farmers who are devoted to that principle.
Yeah, we've stopped giving back to the earth. I mean, nobody composts anymore. Not enough people.
No,
You know,
that's right.
And I have worm farms.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. and a wonderful video for people to watch is called Back to Eden,
Mhm.
and it's about natural. It's completely non-interventional farming.
yeah, that's a great series.
Yeah, and so people need to learn how simple gardening and farming can actually be. And you don't need enormous, tractors and backhoes, and it's like that's all. All that machinery is coming by way of big business, but it's
Absolutely.
not, as you say, it's not feeding the soil. It's honoring the plant, which is that's not the right priority.
No, not at all. We all need to. We should be feeding the soil, and the plants will take care of themselves.
Yeah, and the point that Andre Voisin makes in his book is he says, I'm a simple grass farmer. If you've ever seen the videos with Joel Shackleton, he says, I'm a grass farmer. He's very proud of the fact that he grows a bouquet of grass for his animals to eat. And that's really what it's about. And they're very focused and committed to having good soil so that it can make good grass. And a variety of grasses, not a monocrop of grass. So, I mean, I think you understand it and you've internalized it, but for the benefit of the unwashed heathen out there that need to know this. So it's just a process.
Morley, I have a question on with the excess iron, and I'm sure you're familiar with hemochromatosis.
Oh, sure.
So, what's your take on that? Is that something that's occurring more and more since iron is such an issue?
Yeah, I do think it is. Um, a good source of information for people would be the Iron Disorders Institute. And they have a wonderful website, a lot of good educational material. Um, what's happening, Angie, is we're being programmed into thinking that the only form of iron overload is when there's a genetic mutation. There are two genes that can get affected. One, I believe, is C282Y, and the other is, I think, 58. I can never remember the initials for it. But the one is far more prevalent than the latter. But that, I believe, is very misleading. The the correlation or the characteristic that defines hemochromatosis is a condition called aceruloplasminemia, that there's no ceruloplasmin in the blood. And so they put the letter A in front of it, implying that there would be none. And the stance that I'm taking is that most people are subclinical hemochromatosis, that the level of iron loading is so significant in the body that people are not aware of how toxic they've become. And there's three characteristics that I typically tell people about iron that are important to know. One is that there is no active mechanism to excrete iron other than blood loss. And so you have a biological advantage over Gary and me because you're a woman and you have a cycle.
Actually, though, Morley, I was going to tell you, I am kind of, I guess, an odd one because I have had excessive iron. I actually didn't get one for 4 years, which I'm sure definitely made things even worse. I also have hemochromatosis that runs in my family, but I surprisingly didn't have that. But with all my other issues, it ended up that I was very high in my iron. So I'm not typical, but yes, that is true.
And my guess is that if you're high in iron, you're low in ceruloplasmin. And if you haven't tested that, that would be the first place to start. Because if you're high in iron, that means your liver is congested with iron.
Right.
Because that's where 95% of iron gets stored initially. So first thing, we can't excrete it other than blood loss. Second characteristic of iron is, and this is the most dangerous, is that iron is attracted to and stored by tissue that is damaged. And it begs the question, well, what's damaged tissue? Well, damaged tissue is tissue that's trying to make energy. So how do we make energy? Inside our mitochondria, which is like a little racetrack, there's 5 stops, and they're called complexes. And at complex 4, hemoglobin delivers oxygen to the party, and there's an enzyme there called cytochrome C oxidase, which hands electrons to the oxygen molecule, and by doing that, an ATP molecule drops out at the bottom of the gumball machine. That can only happen if ceruloplasmin is present. If ceruloplasmin is not present, at that point, the mitochondria makes free radicals. So let's assume that you make the ATP, then it's got to go to complex 5 where it gets connected to a magnesium ion. Because the body doesn't recognize ATP, it only recognizes magnesium ATP. And the reason why iron gets stored is when the body can't make ATP, it makes free radicals, and that causes the iron to stay attached to the mitochondria. And that's how it starts to build up. So damaged tissue, tissue looking for energy, attracts more iron. And then the third characteristic of iron is that the blood test is not representative of what's happening in the tissue. Right. So that what's happening is leading clinicians all over the world are abandoning blood tests to measure iron status and are turning to MRIs. And so they're studying MRIs of the liver for cirrhosis and cancer, MRIs of the pancreas to assess diabetes, MRIs of the heart to assess heart failure and cardiovascular disease, and MRIs of the brain to assess all facets of neurodegenerative disease. All of those conditions are all caused by excess iron, and there are thousands others, but those are the big 4 right now. And you can even use an MRI to assess the iron status in the bones causing the osteoporosis. But that a lot of people can't imagine that that's what's causing the osteoporosis. But the point is, the blood level may not be representative of the tissue level, but in people with hemochromatosis, it's usually building up. And the trick is being able to decipher based on the symptom survey, a hair test, and a blood test, using those 3 diagnostic tools in tandem to say to what extent is there an iron issue. And what I've come to learn is that the symptom survey that I use is broken down by organ and endocrine gland, And what I'm realizing now is it's telling me where the iron is concentrated in the body. And I can see it distributed throughout the body. And in some people, it's focused predominantly in the liver or in the adrenal gland or the thyroid. And it's helping me communicate to people where the iron concentration is in their body because it does get stored. So, hemochromatosis is a very serious condition, but it's being immortalized, if I can use that word, as the sole source of the problem when I think it's a spectrum disorder. And I think hemochromatosis is at the far tail at one end, and I think most people are in the big hump in the bulk of the people have iron overload, but their genes haven't flipped yet. And my position on all of the MTHFR psychodrama is that that is all iron-induced transcription errors, because when you start to pull back the curtain on the transcription errors, you find out that it's methyltransferase enzymes that are responsible for all of these genes to flip on and off. Well, there are 200 of them. And I've studied 10 of them very carefully, only to find out that ceruloplasmin is essential for all 10 of them. So I'm going to make a leap of faith that it's responsible for all 200. Well, there's nothing that'll immobilize ceruloplasmin faster than too much iron. And so my criticism of the MTHFR community is that they're very long on what and very short on why. And I don't think they know. I don't think maybe Dr. Ben and Dr. Amy know, but they sure don't talk about it. And I think the public needs to know that this issue started 70 years ago when they started to put iron filings in the flour. And it's taken 3 generations for the iron to build up in the tissue to the point where it causes defects, because the 2 most toxic radicals in the body are the hydroxyl radical and what's called O-no. It's the peroxynitrite radical, spelled O-N-O-O, and those 2 cause genetic defects. So this whole idea that suddenly we're being born with genetic defects is an absolute crock of you-know-what. And people believe that they're broken and don't understand that it's because they're a magnet and they're attracting iron, and it has iron causes rust. And inside the body, we put a fancy name to it. It's called oxidative stress. And there's a whole field of, it's called the free radical theory of aging. And what you find out is that they know that iron is what's behind the aging process. They just don't talk about it publicly. This is not. Here's the irony. Most go to Walmart and look at the morphology of America. And most people, you think like you're in Star Wars and Jabba the Hutt's bar, and most people have this cherub face, this round moon face, and they look very young. That's the sign of estrogen dominance. That's a sign of copper that's not being regulated by ceruloplasmin. But what they don't realize is that cherub-looking, angelic-looking face has rust on the inside. And that's the danger of this iron issue, is that this dysregulation of both iron and copper, because of the breakdown in making ceruloplasmin, causes us to look young on the outside, but we're ancient on the inside. And the average person would never think to connect those dots. And that insight came to me the other day when I was talking to 6 women who were at Starbucks, fascinated by this bloke they saw every Friday who was poring over all these articles. And they asked me, "What do you do?" And so I started talking to them about what I do. And I realized that all of them, 3 of them admitted that they volunteered it before I even asked. They said, "Well, I'm estrogen dominant." And then I went, oh my gosh, that means you're iron toxic. I said it to myself, it means you're iron toxic. And I made the connection. I was like, oh my gosh. And that's happening all over the world. But people aren't connecting those dots.
No.
So true.
So
We're kind of coming up to the end of the show.
are you kidding? I mean, this is not a two-parter. I mean, really, come on.
No,
We can do two
keep
parts.
Keep going. Please keep going.
It's so fascinating. God, it's like I could listen to this all day long. It's,
Yes.
knowledge is incredible. And
Definitely.
could we have you back again sometime?
Yes.
Sure,
Please.
I would be delighted. I really enjoy the repartee. You all understand this at a level that most people don't. And so whatever I can do to help further your understanding or the community that you're building would be my delight. So certainly plan on that. It's just you guys get to decide how much farther out do we need to go. But
Are you available tomorrow?
yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Morley.
How do people get in touch with you? Where can they get in more information from you?
Well, they have to have a special bat ring that's light up in the sky, and well, there are a couple different ways. It seems that a lot of people get connected to me through the Magnesium Advocacy Group on Facebook, the MAG group, and people who want to reach out to me via email can do so at my email is Morley, Morley, at gotmag.org. And that website, the GotMag website, has a lot of information, a lot of articles and stuff. And then I'm very willing to share my phone number, which is 847-922-8061. It's a Chicago phone number, but I'm down in the bayou, so don't get freaked out. And, it's really funny. A couple people have called just to see if I would answer, and when I answer, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you really do answer your phone." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, So it's really funny. Years ago, I worked with a consultant who I have a bit of a gift of gab, but I couldn't hold a candle to her, and she was my boss, and so when cell phones were first coming out, I designed my greeting for her. And I said, please leave a message of any length and I'll be happy to get back to you. And by God, she left the longest messages. But she was a very sweet woman, but she just didn't know when to stop. But most people are so intimidated by he gave me his cell phone number. Leave a message of any length. And so they race through their message and then hang up. So it's all about the reverse psychology. So this has been a lot of fun. I hope it was helpful for you guys. I hope it's helpful for your community, and be delighted to circle back whenever it makes sense and respond to additional questions, or maybe an appropriate thing would be respond to the blowback that'll probably come from people listening to this bozo from the bayou. He says, "What did he say now?" So. However you want to play it, I'll be happy to dance to that too.
Well, we would love that, and I'm sure that there's going to wake a lot of people up. This was an incredible conversation.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation with both of you. It was really a lot of fun, and hopefully it'll help a number of people. And
yes.
So that it's always exciting to communicate with kindred souls. So the light in me greets the light in you, and I look forward to our paths continuing to cross.
Absolutely, us too. Thank you very much, Morley. Really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your ability and your willingness to share. Thank you.
You bet. Very good. Well, you guys enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely, us too.
Okay, very good.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
So
How cool was that?
that was amazing, wasn't
Yay!
it? The guy is phenomenal. And to think he's been doing this for like, what do you say, 7 years?
Yeah.
To come from a hospital administrator, not having any knowledge in it at all, he's been studying.
Yes, yeah. How everybody can contact us at LivefoodDtox@gmail.com with questions, questions, concerns, anything, love, we'll take it all.
Anything any comments you'd like to leave about the interview with Morley would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And everybody go to his site and thank him for coming over and speaking.
Thank him very much. We were very lucky to get him.
Yes. And the fact that he's willing to come back.
Yes!
So.
Yes. Perfect.
I think that.
Hope that helps. We hope that helped a lot. It definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things too.
Yeah.
Just wow.
Yeah, that's all I can say. Everything that I've watched of his, he has a lot of stuff on YouTube, so it'd be good to go watch some of that stuff too. But everything I've seen about him has been wow. The information is so in depth and he's so knowledgeable, and he has such an easy way to present it.
Simple.
This is just like in conversation. It's really cool. So I think we're very fortunate to get him, and look forward to having him back on, and all the other guests we're going to have in the future.
Yes.
To help everybody unlearn what they've been taught and relearn the simple truth about their health and that the body heals itself.
And going back to nature, going back to what used
Right.
to be the way of healing.
Right. We're the only creatures that aren't living in nature.
Mm.
We're charged by the sun, we're grounded by the earth, which has been taken away from us. Well, we're sunscreen when we go out, and our body's a solar panel. So it's supposed to absorb the sun. And our food is not, it's more food-like products now rather than actual food. So there's all those things that we need to consider, but I think we need to wrap this up so we
Sounds good.
so we don't have a 4-hour video.
Well, we hope this helped you guys. This was an experience, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Well,
Absolutely.
maybe not once in a lifetime because we're going to have more, but
Absolutely.
first time for me, so.
Yes, me too. Me too. I mean, considering, was it 4 weeks ago? We didn't even know how to use Skype. And here we are doing a group meeting.
You and me.
Absolutely. And we're always pushing the boundaries and the limits, and not only physically, but mentally as we're putting all this stuff together. So we hope that everybody learns from it and grows from it, and then they end up sharing their own stories.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys want your eyes read, get over to Gary's page, his iridology and detoxification page, and get them posted up there. Get him working. I know he's already working hard, but definitely need to help you guys, and he is an important piece. So use him.
And I will talk to you later.
Yes.
All right?
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See you later. Love you.
Keep going, guys. Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.